There's this line in the transcript, and it really bothers me. It says, "Put my face on everything." And it's making this very clear demand that I cannot fulfill. And the funny thing is that when it was said in the workshops, I didn't really notice it. It was just a kind of throwaway remark towards the end of the workshop. And if anything, I took it as a sign that I should have wrapped things up a bit earlier. But then, when I was preparing the transcripts, it jumped out at me. And the thing was, I just spent hours meticulously obscuring everyone's face, as you would expect. But it's actually a very clear demand made by one of the participants, a very clearly expressed wish to have their face put on everything. And yet, I still think that the risks outweigh the benefits of exposing this person's real identity.
Perhaps then we need to think of this not as a literal face, but as any kind of surface that allows us to enter into an ethical relationship that is marked by difference that is not indifference. This kind of relationship is foundational to the ethics of Haraway Barad's concept of responsibility. Responsibility reframes ethical commitments as an ongoing effort to increase our capacity to respond to and entangle with the world, rather than as a set of predefined rights, duties, and relationships. This concept has previously been explored in participatory design to consider how we can make and sustain commitments that go beyond easily defined sites of participation. This concept has particular relevance to the research that I was conducting, which was on the subject of hate crime. Along with colleagues from criminology and computer science, we ran 2 workshops with LGBT+ young people. These were aimed at helping them to consider how hate crime reporting mechanisms could be redesigned to better suit their needs. And we did so through the use of speculative methods, in particular using a variation on Christina Anderson's Magic Machine workshop format. However, the problem we initially presented, how can we make better tools for you to report hate incidents, was largely ignored or avoided by the participants. Instead, the participants presented us with new, inventive problems that open up new ways to think and talk about hate crime. And central to these problems is the question of face. Hate crime in many ways is an inversion of the face-to-face encounter that initiates responsibility. It is marked by a failure to recognise the other as having a face and a violent refusal to co-become with them. Reporting mechanisms are therefore, in some sense, an attempt to restore a victim's face in the eyes of a wider society. However, unlike the original problems, these new problems aren't neatly located within criminology, design, computer science, or some interdisciplinary constellation of the 3. Despite our shared commitment to respond to the participants, we cannot do so adequately, let alone imagine that we can solve these problems as designers and researchers. And so the demand made by the participant Alex to have their face recognised is one that I cannot adequately fulfil, at least in the present.
In the absence of an easy resolution to this problem posed by this demand, it has led me to wonder about who is making that demand. Is it the flesh and blood person who chose Alex as a pseudonym? Or is it someone different? Is it this figure that was created through the process of research, the process of transcription? In some senses, that Alex that appears on the page is my invention. I transcribed their words, I obscured their face and changed certain details in order to make them distinct from that real flesh and blood person. And yet, Alex is not my invention alone. There was and is a real person who said those words, and who said them in a way that made it really difficult to transcribe. They shouted and whispered and spoke over people and expressed themselves in gestures and sounds that were really challenging to render on the page. And so, in some ways, they act as a reminder for all the ways in which the transcripts cannot ever fully capture what took place in those workshops. And yet, despite that failure, these transcripts seem to have a capacity to make a demand on me that the real person never did. I wasn't listening in the workshop, but I'm listening now.
Sarah Pink has written about how transcripts are not just texts to be read and interpreted, but are a way for researchers to reconnect through memory and imagination to the moments in which the research encounter first took place. Transcripts therefore allow workshops to reappear, for us to be once again in the presence of participants. But the workshop and the participant that returns is distinct from the original, just as a ghost is distinct from the person that once lived. This haunting capacity of transcripts is what led me to conduct a hauntological analysis. Hauntology is a pun taken very seriously. A play on the term ontology, it replaces the priority of being and presence with the figure of the ghost, as that which is neither present nor absent. In this paper, I use hauntology to explore how speculative methods in participatory design are shaped by such absent presences. I argue that speculation is an important part of post-solutionist design practices because of its capacity not just to happen once, but to keep happening, and to keep happening differently. And I suggest that wonder has an important role to play in making and sustaining commitments to problems that exceed our capacity to respond. As discussed by Sarah Ahmed, wonder is a way of thinking critically, asking I wonder why, but one that remains open to becoming differently. It also asks I wonder if. Wonder asks us to see things as if for the first time, not to cut ourselves off from the past, but in order to radicalize our relationship to it, so that we can reshape the present. Cultivating shared spaces of wonder is one way in which participatory design can answer Haraway's rallying cry to stay with the trouble.
Wonder doesn't solve problems. It doesn't even necessarily guarantee that we can respond to them. But what it does do is allow us to keep coming back. And because it accepts our responses as provisional, it means that we can remain open to responding differently. I was wondering when I read those words in the transcripts. When I saw them as if for the first time, it led me to wonder what they meant in ways that never occurred to me when I first encountered them. It led me to think about how both absences and presences shape our participatory processes.
So I think this raises a few key questions for participatory design. The first of which is how other participatory design methods and processes are also shaped by absent presences. I've applied a hauntological analysis to some quite specific speculative methods, but I'd be really interested to hear how a similar analysis could be used in other forms of participatory design. And secondly, I think it raises questions of how we represent participation, how we can make it present across multiple sites in ways that open up shared spaces of wonder. Thank you very much for watching. Please do read the paper. There was a lot I wasn't able to cover in the video, and I look forward to joining you in the online panel discussion.